This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. If you're around tonight, I am going to be live streaming this conversation, or I want to say Q&A with Elon Musk and Donald Trump. I'm doing it because we are up against some really evil people. I mean, you already know this, but today it just got even more wacky. The EU dictators are trying to shake down Elon Musk over this conversation with US presidential candidate Donald Trump. What did I tell you about Europe and the UK putting pressure on the US in order to curb free speech? They desperately are trying to break our First Amendment and our civil liberties. And this is a bit too far, in my opinion. And I'm going to read it to you. For those that are American, you should be extremely pissed off. The European Union is meddling here to prevent information getting to the Americans. And UK and Europe, you should also be pissed off that your governments and your political leaders want to hold back information and decide what information you get to see and talk about. So Thierry Breton is the digital dictator who sent this letter to Elon Musk on behalf of enforcing this Digital Services Act that the EU has now implemented. Now, I know you've seen this 1,000 times, but every time it's important to speak to it because the censorship that you're seeing in the EU and the laws being passed there, as well as recently with the UK and the laws being passed there as well, are a result of these people. So even though Renee DiResta, Tristan, Jory Craig, Meghan, Harry, and all these other organizations, they had influence and input into getting those bills passed. They testified in the process. Let's say for the UK Parliament, their names show up in these reports. So they're all working together. But what's distressing about this is the people from America who are doing this from afar. So we have people in the United Kingdom who are working on directly impacting free speech, not only with helping push policies in other countries, but to put pressure on the United States. We're seeing this with Australia, we're seeing this with the UK, we're seeing this with Canada, and every government that's pushing these laws are saying the exact same thing, lockstep with the United States, such as reducing harms, increasing transparency and understanding with access to information, and then building trust, getting people back on the side of the government and believing that propaganda. So now on to this letter that Thierry Breton sent Elon Musk. He writes, "Dear Mr. Musk, I'm writing to you in the context of recent events in the United Kingdom and in relation to the planned broadcast on your platform X of a live conversation between a U.S. presidential candidate and yourself, which will also be accessible to users in the EU. I understand that you are currently doing a stress test of the platform. In this context, I am compelled to remind you of the due diligence obligations set out in the Digital Services Act, DSA, as outlined in my previous letter. As the individual entity ultimately controlling a platform with over 300 million users worldwide, of which 1/3 in the EU, that has been designated as a very large online platform, you have the legal obligation to ensure X's compliance with EU law, and in particular the DSA in the EU. This notably means ensuring, on one hand, that freedom of expression and of information, including media freedom and pluralism, are effectively protected, and, on the other hand, that all proportionate and effective mitigation measures are put in place regarding the amplification of harmful content in connection with relevant events, including live streaming, which, if unaddressed, might increase the risk profile of X and generate detrimental effects on civil discourse and public security. This is important against the background of recent examples of public unrest brought about by the amplification of content that promotes hatred, disorder, incitement to violence, or certain instances of disinformation. It also implies informing EU judicial and administrative authorities without undue delay on the measures taken to address their orders against content considered illegal, according to national and/or EU law, taking timely, diligent, non-arbitrary, and objective action upon receipt of notices by users considering certain content illegal, informing users concerning the measures taken upon receipt of the relevant notice, and publicly reporting about content moderation measures. So let's pause for a second. This bullshit about, on one hand, that freedom of expression and of information, including media freedom and pluralism, are effectively protected. Only the speech that they want protected, right? Then we have the added stress that is being put now on Elon Musk with these threats of, if you don't regulate or moderate the platform, you know that you are subjected to these laws. Now, let's talk about some possibilities. Hypothetically speaking, where I see this getting out of control, and I wouldn't put it past the Kakala campaign and the Democrats for asking Thierry, hey, Thierry, can you do us a solid here and let's enforce this law? Because it is the strongest out of the online safety bill and the laws that are passed in Canada. The EU has more people. Think about how now this EU legal instrument can be weaponized by the United States. So let's quickly go back to leading up to the 2020 election and what was going on around that time. The Biden-Harris campaign was colluding with the social media companies to censor conservative speech. Obviously, Meghan and Harry were a part of this because the Megxit accounts were also involved in getting shut down because Prince Harry had access to the people who were doing it. What we saw happening were these bots or paid people of Meghan's called the Sugars or Sussex Squad who were going after threatening, harassing, doxing, and also spamming to get people shut down. Fast forward now, in this scenario, we know that the Sugars are doing double duty, most likely also being paid by the Kakala campaign, just like how Meghan is paying her Sugars to go after, and whether it be spam accounts to report them. This is a situation where the same thing could very much happen here. So, for instance, let's say Trump does say something that could possibly be interpreted as truth by most, but to those that don't like that because it doesn't fall in line with the agenda, will go ahead and start a literal fire online, inciting, doing whatever. You know that that's going to be factored into whatever they're going to be monitoring here from the EU in order to poke around and get information in order to make the case to then go after Elon Musk to shut the platform down. Ultimately, this is the angle that they're taking. So in this case, could I see the U.S. taking advantage of this? Absolutely. Will they do it? Most likely. Unfortunately, this country is currently lockstep with this one world government nonsense. But finishing off this letter, in this respect, I note that the DSA obligations apply without exceptions or discrimination to the moderation of the whole user community and content of X, including yourself as a user with over 190 million followers, which is accessible to EU users and should be fulfilled in line with the risk-based approach of the DSA, which requires greater due diligence in case of a foreseeable increase of the risk profile. As you know, formal proceedings are already ongoing against X under the DSA, notably in areas linked to the dissemination of illegal content and the effectiveness of the measures taken to combat disinformation. As the relevant content is accessible to EU users and being amplified also in our jurisdiction, we cannot exclude potential spillovers in the EU. Therefore, we are monitoring the potential risks in the EU associated with the dissemination of content that may incite violence, hate, and racism in conjunction with major political or societal events around the world, including debates and interviews in the context of elections. Let me clarify that any negative effect of illegal content on X in the EU, which could be attributed to the ineffectiveness of the way in which X applies the relevant provisions of the DSA, may be relevant in the context of the ongoing proceedings and of the overall assessment of X's compliance with EU law. This is in line with what has already been done in the recent past. For example, in relation to the repercussions and amplification of terrorist content or content that incites violence, hate, and racism in the EU, such as the context of the recent riots in the United Kingdom. Hold on a second. The United Kingdom is not a part of the EU. Did I miss something here? Oh, is it because the information leaked over, spilled over into other countries of the EU? Did it cause any harm? I don't recall seeing any news around any type of violence or racism or hatred being spread as a result of these riots that have been isolated to the United Kingdom. Anyhow, I therefore urge you to promptly ensure the effectiveness of your systems and to report measures taken to my team. My services and I will be extremely vigilant to any evidence that points to breaches of the DSA and will not hesitate to make full use of our toolbox, including by adopting interim measures should it be warranted to protect EU citizens from serious harm. Yours sincerely, Thierry Breton. How patronizing is the tone of this letter? Like the audacity of this clown to think that he could dictate and tell Elon Musk how to run his business. I get that there are laws in place, but Elon Musk is not responsible for if information spills over, somehow gets to someone in their region that they don't like. This is the ridiculousness of all of this. Can you believe that this little Napoleon digital dictator is basically blackmailing Elon Musk in an attempt to stop Donald Trump from speaking tonight? All these evil globalists, they want to see America brought to their knees. They want to see us weak and subservient. And this is why you're seeing all the tricks being pulled out in order to stop Donald Trump. And because Elon Musk is allowing information and truth to be shared on his platform, they need to stop him too, because all the dirtiness is now coming out. And if Donald Trump does get into office, then that stops the grift of these globalists taking the middle class wealth. You cannot deny that the world was better off 4 years ago. Remember, during the Trump era, there was no wars. In addition, our immigration was at its lowest and our country was secured. Also, most importantly, our economy was thriving. So, of course, Trump was going to get a second term, and the powers that be that could not stand this man being in power, they unleashed that deadly virus onto millions to shut the whole place down and to destroy all of that. Remember, they did that to us. And these two horrible human beings came to the United States in 2020 to help the current administration get into office. They were behind the scenes, oh so quietly, silencing and suppressing people's voices with these very same folks sitting in front of you. These people are responsible for the state of the world that we see today now. In 2016, Meghan lit the match for the racism and division in the UK. And people need to realize that it was all intentional. She didn't just get there because she fell into Prince Harry's lap because she was lucky with the circle of people that she was hanging out with. She was placed there. It's painfully clear that these two are a part of this destruction and on board with this one world government because they see themselves as the ruling class. And that's why Meghan totes around as if her shit doesn't stink. It's why I focus so much on this censorship, because we have seen how they have weaponized and manipulated the media in order to push narratives that truly have been destructive. Based on just principle alone, the fact that the EU and so many others don't want Donald Trump to speak, they want to silence him, I'm going to go ahead and stream this tonight. I'm willing to bet that the EU sent a similar letter to Meta as well as YouTube, just putting them on notice about this upcoming conversation that's about to be held by a US presidential candidate. And they need to be taking moderation actions or at least be on alert for moderation. And you can bet that there will be suppression. Here's the thing. For America, this is constitutionally protected speech. This is a U.S. presidential candidate. And in a public square, we as the American people have the right to have that information and discuss it peacefully. So I am going to go ahead and stream this. Hopefully I won't have any problems with the stream, but you know how YouTube is with topics that they don't want to give visibility to, they always end up messing with you. So I would expect nothing less tonight, but let me know your thoughts about what you think about this letter that was issued by Thierry Breton. Do you think that they overstepped their boundaries here in telling Elon Musk pretty much what to do and how to run his business? I do. I also think that there's a lot of fear, but who knows? Maybe I could be reading it wrong. Definitely let me know your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll see you later. Bye.
I was such a fraud.